Now, Christianity has its 13th apostle, a faithful witness to the love, mercy, and truth of Jesus Christ. How about you? Will you be the 13th apostle?
We are in the world, but not of the world. Satan is the god of this world. St. Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians, what is this world, and to what in this world do we owe our fidelity? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the 13th Apostle, where we explore the good, the beautiful, and the true of the Catholic faith and the Catholic Church. This is Tom Caffrey with my co-host, Dan Duddy. Danny boy.
Hello, Tommy boy.
We hope you still have nails left in your fingers, chewing them down, waiting for part 2 with our illustrious guest, Jim Mulvihill, and the crowd favorite for the greater Boston area,
Boston.
Deacon Chuck.
Hiya, Tom.
Kelly. You see, you jumped the gun. You didn't wait, because they don't know Deacon Chuck. Oh, Kelly.
Oh, that guy.
And that's with an EY, right?
Yes, sir. Spare no ease. Keep them coming.
All right. We're going to carry on with our discussion about patriotism, faith. To who or what do we owe our allegiance? A little bit of a clue right there. I mean, we don't have a monarchy. We don't pledge allegiance. You know where I'm going with this, right, Danny?
I'm not sure. But
So we don't pledge allegiance to the crown. We don't pledge allegiance to, I don't know, the Red Sox.
no.
Hey, watch it.
Although, ladies and gentlemen, I have a photo. Dan knows he's got a. Hey, have you been to confession yet for this? I'm just wondering, if you had a Boston Red Sox hat on. Dan, we're going to blow past that very unpleasant topic of your lack of fidelity, to your home team, and go on to lesser important things.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're doing this on a Zoom call so we can see each other. Now, it's unfair to you because, you can't see, and I'm informed by these 3 faces and their mannerisms and whatnot. Like Deacon Chuck got his arm on the desk. It looks like he's giving. We've got a bunch of third base coaches here, ladies and gentlemen, all sorts of signals. Oh, gosh. So it's a lot of fun being together like this. And it's one of the things that, in thinking about this topic and researching it, about the patriotism, okay, everybody knows the whole idea, the bigger picture of our country. Jim talked about that we're an idea. This nation is an idea and an ideal. A lot of people who criticize the founding documents, saying we haven't lived up to them, which in many cases we have not lived up to all of them. But anytime I've been in discussion, argument, debate, whatever with people like that, I always have to remind them these were aspirational documents. We're not perfect. We haven't reached perfection. We can't reach perfection as a nation because the nation is made up of people. And it's tough giving your love to an abstraction. So what is that? And I know in my reply to Jim in our email exchange about this was, we have to incarnate these ideas, these abstractions. So George Washington, for example, speaking of monarchy, he could have been a monarch. Jim knows this very well. They wanted him to be king. Not everybody, but many influential people wanted him to be king, and he refused. What humility, right? But he is close to close to this concept of a deity in terms of American founding, in my view. And I mean, I'm going by what I've read in many cases. And Jim, when you and I were talking about this, I mentioned the dome of the rotunda in our Capitol, which has the great painting, the apotheosis of George Washington, the highest, not just literally in terms of the painting, but he's the highest ideal of what an American can be. So And then our faith. A lot of people have trouble with trying to conceptualize God. We look at the qualities, and certainly we read in sacred scripture, these qualities of God. But the great thing about Christianity is God became incarnate. So we now have somebody in whom we can identify, just like we can with Washington, or pick another founder, another great person. It could be Martin Luther King, from a standpoint of nonviolence. And if you've never read, and this goes to everybody in the audience, if you've never read even parts of his letter from a Birmingham jail, I urge you to read at least part of that. It's really amazing. So, as I mentioned, we're sojourners in exile. Again, in Philippians, our citizenship is in heaven. Again, we're in the world, not of the world. In Galatians chapter 6, let us do good to everyone, especially those who are the household of faith. Boy, it's really tough to think of the people in our lives that we love, and that you guys said so valiantly that you would defend, as I would. But in sacred scripture, it's talking about, and St. Augustine goes into a lot of this, and again, in his great book, City of God, and he's contrasting that with the earthly city and what has become known as the city of man. But this is not where we're going to end up. That doesn't mean that we're walking along the way, on our way to, the heavenly city. But, when the four of us here, each one of us would defend the other to the utmost. So anyway, I think that can you honestly say that you're closer? If we look at what was said in Galatians, do good to everybody, but especially those who are in your faith. Well, if our children have fallen away from the faith or never were in the faith, if other things are going on, can you honestly say that you would be closer to the people, let's say, in your parish than you are to loved ones who are not in the faith? To me, that's almost as hard as love your enemies. Turn the other cheek.
Well, Tom, do you have relatives that you maybe do not have as close a relationship with as you do with people in your own parish?
Well, I can tell you, I have family members with whom I am not as close as I am to you three. I don't know that I'd ever get to be put in a situation where I would have to choose between somebody in my family, Deacon Chuck, Dan, Jim. I wouldn't want to be put in that situation. But if they're doing a wrong, an evil, something like that,
mm-hmm.
I would still be torn. I mean, it would be difficult. I wouldn't be torn. It would be difficult, though.
Right. Well, and still, I think if any of them were under threat, that you would rally, right? You would come to their aid in a heartbeat.
Yes, but what about the question, if your wife and your mother were drowning, who would you save? Well, you've got two arms, but
right.
I just really so so it's like, well, what is more important? Are you, when you see the flag, I don't remember when I was mentioned this to one of you guys, when we're revolted when we see somebody take a knee at the American flag. And I believe it's an easy thing to understand that, okay, that flag represents the ideals as close to perfection as possible, which we'll never attain in this earth. But if you took a knee to the pride flag, you could easily lose your job. You could be sanctioned in numerous ways.
Yeah, the big difference is the moral base, right? I mean, there's a moral tug that all of us, and we can't pretend that there is not a natural law. There is a natural law. We all have that written on our hearts. Some people want to thumb their nose at that and do quite frequently. But the reality is that we're moral beings. We have a desire to be moral. And that's why I think all of the concept of patriotism rings so true for so many. That's why all these fraternal organizations that swelled up the Masons and the Knights of Columbus, which, by the way, you can't be a Mason and a Knight of Columbus. You know why? It makes Masonite, but that's a whole nother thing.
I see this long hook coming into the image here.
But it's a sense of belonging, right? I mean, the fact that we can even have this conversation, right? The fact that we're here, it's fraternity, right? In a way, this is a microcosm of patriotism, right? Even scouts, I have two sons that were in the scouting program. All of the things that the earmarks of, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. All of these things, we would, every meeting, we're there and claiming this as our own, and there's an element of patriotism there, and it's a good thing. It's true, and it's an important, and again, there's so much battling against it because we live in a broken world. But I don't think it diminishes the necessity of patriotism as a response to this natural law.
I just wanted to share something with Jim. Jim, I'll tell you, Jim, that, well, all of us here, but especially I want to go to Jim on this. My peer group has changed considerably over the last couple of years. It's evolved into very much so a faith-based bunch of men and women who, help me cultivate my faith and help me with, literally in my mission. And my other peers, previous peers, they know that there's changes going on. I try to coerce them in to get closer with me on my mission, my ministry, and I won't give up on that. Now, we also know, Jim, that we have a common thing with something that we've done together in the game of football, right? There's something there's a commonality that kind of bonds us, right? Brings us together. But I want to ask you a question straight up. Being a combat veteran, and I know that you agree because you're shaking your head when we talked about our peers having shifted to Christ-based, God-based peers. Tell me about maybe an evolution. How are your relations with the guys that you fought with, and in comparison to your faith-based peers today?
First of all, there's time and distance between most of us. The closest guys that I directly serve with in my unit are in Virginia, North Carolina, so I don't get to see them on a regular basis. I was fortunate, Dan, in that I found that most of the guys that I came in contact with were in one way or another were religious. They had a strong faith. Whether it was Baptist, whether it was non-denominational, Catholics, Protestant, whatever. Most of the guys had a faith that was formed in them, and maybe we weren't, and I'll include myself. Maybe we weren't as faithful as we should have been, but there was a moral component to our makeup, and I think that has something to do with the discipline of being in the military, the loyalty, that you share with your brothers and now sisters that you serve with. But I agree with you now, and like I said, some of it is time and distance. But I find that most of my close friends, the three of you and a few others in our local church, I have gravitated to the guys who are stronger in their faith. I think part of that is, Dan, is because I'm searching. I'm trying to be better in my faith, and I try to surround myself with moral people. I try to surround myself with people who have the same beliefs that I do. Not lockstep, but we have the same thought process when it comes to God, when it comes to what's after this world, and that's the best way I can answer that. I'm like you. My friend base, my comrade base has switched somewhat because of where I am and where the guys I serve with, some of who passed away. But the ones who are in my local area, my church, my friend base now, it's definitely gone to a more faith-based friendships. I'd say the vast majority of them.
How obvious or evident was your faith with the guys you fought with when you were actually in the fray?
God forgive me, but when you're in the fray, you don't have time to think about, you really don't have time to have that conscious thought about God. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just being totally honest about that. You don't have time really for anything other than doing your job, staying alive and trying to keep your buddies alive. But in the pre-mission time, I know I did. I know most of the guys did. said, would say a little prayer. I know when we got back on a chopper or humped it out of where we were thankful, that we were all in one piece, and we were very obvious about it. There was no hiding the fact. And again, like I said, most of the guys that I was with, in some way or another, were faithful men.
Thanks, Jim.
I mean, that's as honest as I could be. I wish I had a better answer for you, but
It's a great answer. Gosh, thank you.
Dan, as you know, we are going to have a very interesting interview in a few weeks with Larry Chapp, author of Confession of a Catholic Worker, about Dorothy Day and his Christian witness, this author's Christian witness in the context of the Catholic worker. She's now a servant of God. It's just interesting. She would be, and she's American. She's against war. She's a pacifist. So how do you, I don't know, I'm going to toss this out to the three of you, and whoever speaks first.
I'm not even going to let you finish your question. You can finish it because I'm kind of right to the chase. There's nobody here among the four of us, but in general, there's nobody who has a uniform on that wants to go to war.
Amen.
We probably hate war more than anybody you can imagine.
That's what my father said. God
because we bear the brunt of it, and we also have the responsibility of executing it. And those are heavy burdens. And
so, how do you and Deacon Chuck, if you had a chance to talk to Dorothy Day, but in thinking of her, I mean, she is now a servant of God, so she's at another level. A pacifist. She was against the war, against the bombing, the nuclear bombing. There's a tension there, and the tension is also, and I'm sure there were wrestling matches going on about, well, obviously about the atomic bombs, using the atomic bombs, and our teaching. This is I talked to refer to Dan's natural law. This is natural law, but it's also natural law is from God. So this is it's embedded in our faith. You can't do an evil to get a good. So then we have to define terms. As always, we have to define terms. What is an evil? If you took out somebody in one of your operations, maybe as a preventive measure, because your superiors thought this guy is going to cause harm, but hasn't yet, at least to us.
I'll be totally honest with you. That was a large part of what we did. And I've said it before in different shows I've been on, is that my job wasn't to sit and wait for people to come to me. We went out and hunted people. We were hunters. We went out and hunted people, and the idea was to take them out before they took us out. Now you hope your intelligence is correct. You hope you're taking out the right people for the right reasons. But that was our job. We weren't sitting in a tent someplace or in a compound someplace waiting for somebody to attack us and then we're going to go out and get them. That's not the way we work. Somebody like Dorothy Day, you say, is a pacifist. I don't have any qualms with somebody who has those strong moral beliefs. And again, as I said, anybody who's gone to war is the last person who wants to have to go to war again. So in the bigger picture, I look at myself. Yeah, I'm a pacifist. I did what I had to do, but doesn't necessarily mean I wanted to do it. Same with the guys that served. There was nobody that I served with. And again, we operated in smaller units, so you get to know them pretty well. And I can't think of one of the guys that I knew who took glee in taking somebody's life.
Okay, and so Deacon Chuck is part of a support system, and you and I talked about this.
Yes.
So he is still related to conflict, to war, to killing. He is part of this massive support structure that's supporting guys in the field. So if there's, some would call it, others would say, well, it just kind of reminds me of the COVID vaccine. The people who didn't want to take the COVID vaccine because of its tangential relationship to an abortion 50 or 60 years ago. Okay, then so Deacon Chuck is remotely related to guys like Jim who are out in the field, but you can only do what you're doing because of the people who prepared you to do what you're doing. So they have, guys like Deacon Chuck, I don't know whether you're going to stay up tonight, late tonight, Deacon Chuck, but what's your relationship to the policy of the U.S. and in terms of conflict? And
I think
the
that's
guys like him all over the place.
First of all, I think that's why, first of all, the military recruits young men, right? This is not, you're not talking about a well-seasoned professional they're pulling out of business who's had a lot of time to reflect and think about, who they are, who they want to become. They get young, boys, who haven't had time to really form themselves as fully integrated adults. And they indoctrinate you. I remember when we were steaming over to the Med. This is, it wasn't an official war. It was during the Libyan crisis, and they started. There was propaganda going on. And I tell you what. By the time we got over there, we were ready. We wanted to get out. And I talked with some of the older sailors who had been there for years, and they said, peacetime Navy, that's not the real Navy. Like, what are you talking about? They said the camaraderie is missing. There's, they yearned for this combat, and not necessarily the ever-present risk of, their demise, but there was an element there. And the only thing I can compare it to is its love expressed. There's the two stories of the young man who finds his beautiful girl in a tower. He goes up and he gets her, and they run off and they get married. Great story, right? They live happily ever after. Better story. The young man goes and sees his love trapped by a dragon. He slays the dragon and then gets the girl, and they live happily ever after. It's expressed love, right? It's sacrifice. There's been something spent there. From a moral standpoint, I think we all grapple with that when it comes to things like war, and we're always going to fall short because we're only capable of brokenness. And then we look to the church to help guide us with decisions like, is this sin or is it not sin? Is it moral or is it immoral? And I think those are things that we learn and understand better as we grow older. But Jim, when I was in, there was an element of yearning for combat. And then when you were in, it was always a yearning for peace, You
know what it is? There's two parts to this answer real quick. I know we're running out of time. When you train and train and train, it's like being on a football team. You practice and practice and practice, and you never get to play a game.
Right.
There's an emptiness there. So you train and train and train, especially if you're training in combat arms. When you're younger, yes, you want to put your skills to the test. You want to know that you can do your job under extreme duress. The more experienced you get, the more times you've been down that road. It's not that you avoid it, but the less enthusiastic you may be about going.
Isn't that the point of the scouts? I mean, the formation of the scouts and.
Oh yeah. It's clearly a
manhood, but it doesn't have to be at the expense of somebody else's health or life.
Well, it's a paramilitary organization for sure. I mean, look at what the signs, even the you can't see, and there's Cub Scouts is 2 fingers, right? You put 2 fingers up, and that's Scouts. You say you're Cub Scouts, and then Boy Scouts is 3 fingers, right? You do the 3. What's the military? 4 fingers.
Right? That's just like Dan in football.
That's it. Yeah.
I mean, you're proving yourself. Like the admiral was keeping in your context, both of you in your context. He's like the admiral, but again, there's no maiming, there's no killing. They're proving their manhood. He's making men out of boys, but not at the expense, the cost of lives. And
right.
That's
well, maybe not. I mean, Jim's point is well taken. I mean, it's like, imagine all Dan did was practice and they never got to play a game, right? Well, it's fruitless. There's, where's the fruit? Is there a risk getting out on the field? You bet. Could you get hurt? Yeah. Do people get hurt? Yeah, they do.
And you prove your manhood outside of the military.
Right. Yeah. It's just a different forum. It's just another forum.
Right? Yeah, but a football team is kind of like a military organization if you think about it.
There's many things. The Scouts are.
They're not same thing with the Scouts. But we may have to do a third show some other time, Tom, because then we get into what's the modern day definition of manhood. You know, and we've wrestled with this. I know the four of us have wrestled with this in conversations and probably personally. What is the definition of manhood now? You know, it's certainly
Okay, so what's
different. It's certainly different than I was growing up.
So what we should do in the next conversation is, where's the moral conflict? Whenever our conversation happens again, where's the moral conflict on the football field with the Scouts? And I'm thinking back to the founding of the Scouts as well in England.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, how do we make men, virtuous men out of boys? Obviously, the whole thing about the hero's journey, and you look at great literature, you look at movies, stuff like that. Well, there is a lot of conflict. You know, there is, you're vanquishing evil, but we will have to continue this.
I think so.
The fruit of that is and the fruit of Scouts, one of the biggest fruits was leadership, was developing leaders. Not just, you look at all the Eagle Scout. I used to be on an Eagle Project Board of Review, and you were looking for leadership expressed. That's what we wanted. We wanted leaders, and the ultimate man, of course, is Christ. So
yes.
Last word.
Oh, thank you, Jen. Thank you so much.
Leave it to the man of the cloth to end it with Christ. I tell you.
Beginning and end.
All right. Danny boy.
Stay tuned, folks, for the Angelus and your prayer intentions with Peter and Jemmy.
Once again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, WQPH, for hosting this great conversation. More to come. Always grateful for your help in continuing the mission of WQPH Radio. God bless you, Danny.
God bless you, Tommy. God bless you all.
God bless you guys.
Thank you for listening to the 13th Apostle with Dan Duddy and Tom Caffrey. For more information on Dan, visit his website at www.danduddy.com or email dcduddy@gmail.com. Tom's website is faithpilgrims.com or email trcaffrey@faithpilgrims.com. How about you? Will you be the 13th Apostle?